Hello, Cougars, and welcome to How to Find Your Best Roommate. We're glad you could join us during this exciting time as you get ready for life at the College of Charleston. My name is Megan Rowe, and I'm the Director of Campus Housing. Joining me off camera are staff members from Campus Housing and Campus Services, who are here to help answer for some of your questions in the sidebar if we don't get to them live. During the presentation portion of this event, I'll show you how to search for potential roommates using the My Housing and Dining portal, and also share some advice on things to discuss with potential roommates to help you find the best roommate match. We'll do a Q&A at the end with both live and pre-submitted questions. If we don't get to your question during the live event, please email or call Campus Housing with your questions. I'll put up our contact information on the next slide. Here are a few ways you can find out more about Campus Housing. We encourage you to visit our website for routine information like deadlines and processes. You may also email us at housing.cofc.edu or call us at 843-953-2015 if you have any questions. Before I get started, I wanted to remind everyone of some important deadlines. If you have not already applied for housing, we encourage you to go ahead and do so. The sooner the better. It's important to note that you can go back in and make changes to your roommate preferences and meal plan once you've completed the application. One reason it's good to apply early is that housing is guaranteed for incoming students who complete their housing application by May 1st. Another reason to apply for housing early is that starting in June, you will select your residence hall and room based on the date you completed your housing application. We'll be sending out more information about room selection later this month. All right, let's get started with using the search functions in the My Housing and Dining portal. If you've applied for Campus Housing, you should be quite familiar with the My Housing and Dining portal. To get to the roommate search tools I'm going to discuss, you'll need to log into the portal, click the Apply for Housing and Meal Plan button, and then continue with this year's housing application. The roommate selection page is where you'll be able to search for potential roommates. There are 3 ways to do this. You can search by a person's name or keyword. You can also search by answers to specific profile questions, like your preference for staying up late as an example. Or finally, you can get roommate suggestions based on how you and potential matches answered all of your profile questions. I'll go in order of appearance, and we'll start by searching for a roommate by a name or keyword. Using the search by name keyword function, you can search for someone who might have similar interests to yours. For instance, you can search for someone who mentions basketball in their profile. Click search for your results, and it will show you a potential roommate's name and the description they wrote about themselves in their housing application. What you can see on the screen are actual results, so we've covered up the descriptions for privacy, but you'll generally see a paragraph with things like hometown information, maybe what someone plans to major in, etc. You'll also notice the circles next to the description, showing in this case 60% and 57% match. This match percentage is based on your profile questions and not the keyword you may have entered into the search. Also, because of the way that the housing system calculates matches, anything above 60 to 70% is considered a good match. From here, if you want to see how they answered their profile questions, just click on View Profile. Also note here the Send Message button. I'll discuss that in a moment. On the View Profile page, you'll be able to see how they responded to all of their profile questions asked during the application process. By looking at this information, you can better determine if you might be a good match. Once you're done viewing their profile, you can go back and look at other potential roommates. That's searching by keyword in a nutshell. You can also search by a student's name and follow the same steps. Another way to search for potential roommates is by profile questions. When you search for a roommate by profile questions, you may select one or multiple questions as the basis for your match. The results will show your top matches, and again, you will click to view their profile and see how they responded to all of the questions. The third way to find potential roommates is to use the Suggest Roommates function. This option will show you the best matches based on your responses to all of your profile questions. Hopefully, after viewing some profiles through these search methods, you'll have found one or more students you'd like to room with. You've probably noticed that each of these have a send message option. You can click on that to compose a message or multiple messages to different people. You'll be able to communicate with within the portal, or you can connect with them via social media or email. Sometimes students will include their handles or other contact info in their description, and I'd encourage you to do the same if that's your preference for communicating. Anyone selecting a roommate in advance of room selection will need to form a roommate group. And I do want to point out that you do not have to select a roommate in advance. If that's your preference, you'll live with whomever also chooses the room you select during the room selection process. But back to groups. Once you've found a potential roommate and have communicated with them, it would be best if you talk with them first. You'll click on the Add to Group button next to their name. If you haven't already formed a group, you'll be prompted to create one at that point. After create the group, your request will go through to your future roommate. You will see your requests as outgoing requests. They will see your request in their roommate selection page, where they can accept or decline your request. All requests expire after 2 weeks. Let's dig into some roommate groups just a little bit. First, roommate groups for incoming students should be an even number, with a max of 8 people, since our largest suite style for freshmen has 4 rooms with 2 to a room. Second, group leader is the person who formed the group. They'll be responsible for solidifying your roommate group by May 15th by clicking the Verify Group button. Group leaders can remove roommates from the group up until the time they verify the group. Finally, and importantly, the group leader will be the person who selects your residence hall and rooms once it's time for room selection. We also want to point out that the timing for when you get to select your hall and rooms is not necessarily based on when the group leader completed their housing application. It will be based on the earliest completed application date among your roommate group. I've talked a lot about the technical side of searching for a roommate, and now want to give you some pointers on what to talk to your potential roommates about before you decide to room with one another. Residence Life, a department that we work with closely, has a helpful guide to living with a roommate. You can find the guide on their website or the campus housing site, which is housing.cofc.edu. We've linked it to the roommate section of the How to Apply page for incoming student, and there's also a link on the roommate selection portal page. Residence Life has also included a worksheet that would be helpful to review as you're looking for a roommate, and also once you're getting ready to move in with a roommate. Finally, please talk to your potential roommates about your budget for housing and the residence hall or halls that work for you. This is critical to discuss with your group leader, since they will be the ones selecting your space. Now I'd like to open it up for the Q&A. We'll start with questions that were pre-submitted, and we'll go from there based on how much time we have. Kim Drakeford from Campus Housing will be reading each question.
Good afternoon, everyone. First question. If we end up not finding a roommate, will one be randomly selected based off of housing application answers?
Great question, Kim. If you don't find a roommate using our search functionality, that is totally fine. Campus Housing will not match you with a roommate prior to room selection, but instead you will just select a building and room you are interested in, and will be able to view the profiles of anyone else that may have already selected or selects the space after your room selection time.
Is it okay for freshmen to live off campus? Do students usually do okay grade-wise if they live off campus?
Another great question. We do not have a residency requirement for students to have to live on campus. However, most incoming freshmen choose to live on campus because of how convenient and easy it is to live on campus. Studies actually have shown that students who live on campus have a higher likelihood of staying in school and graduating than students who choose to live off campus. If you decide to live off campus, I strongly recommend getting a commuter meal plan so you can connect with your classmates and have convenient, affordable, and delicious places to eat while you're on campus. Now we're going to open it up for any questions that may have come through in the Q&A. So the first question reads, I have 2 friends that have not committed yet, but are 90% sure. Can I put their names on a suite as I am already committed, or do I need to wait until they are committed? Great question. So for students that have not yet applied for housing, you'll not be able to find them on when you're completing your housing application. So you will have to wait and add them. I would suggest, though, that if you haven't already completed your application, that you go ahead and do that. And then once they complete their application, they will be able to search you and you will be able to search them, and then you can form that roommate group. All of that just needs to be done before May 15th, because that's the last day to create roommate groups. Additionally, it's important to remember that everybody needs to complete their housing application by May 1st to be guaranteed on-campus housing.
Okay, next question. Is there a separate building for honor students?
Sure. We do have an honors community that is located in Berry Hall. There's 2 portions to the honors community. There is the ELLC program that is on the 1st floor of Berry, and then there's the regular honors program that is housed on the 2nd and 3rd floor of Berry. We'll send out more information specifically to honors students on how they can select into the honors community. Honors students are not required to live in Berry unless they are part of that ELLC program. But we do encourage as many students as want to be able to live in Berry that are honors, as it's very convenient with having staff members as well as some classroom space on the ground floor.
Okay, next question. I'd rather go random. Is this okay, and how to proceed?
Sure, that's totally okay if you don't want to go and seek out a roommate. I might suggest just taking a look. Nothing hurts just looking and seeing. Worst case scenario, you might just connect with other students who you may not want to be roommates with, but may have things that are similar to you and that you can already have a friend when you arrive on campus. If you want to just do that and not select a specific roommate, then you'll just proceed forward, completing your application. We'll then send out information a little later this month on how to go through the room selection process. You'll be assigned a room selection number or a room selection time. And then once you get there, you'll just select into a building and the specific room that you want. If another student has already selected into that building and that room, you'll be able to see who they are and can select into that space. Or if you're the first one into the space, then you'll be able to see who selects after you by going back into the My Housing and Dining portal and clicking on the application status page.
Okay, next question. Do you do co-ed housing if a person is interested?
Sure. Currently, we do not have any co-ed housing options. However, if there is a particular reason that you're looking for that, I would encourage you to reach out to our office so that we can connect with you. But we do not have any co-ed by room options. All of our residence halls for next year do have males and females that would be living on the same floor as one another. They just by individual suite, they would be gendered one way or the other.
Okay, next question. How would a student go about moving from on campus to off campus during freshman year if they don't like on campus?
Sure. So I certainly hope that that does not happen. Sometimes students do have a little bit of a transition period from coming onto campus. But what I would encourage first is that you talk to your RA. RAs are students that are going to be living on the floor with you, and their role is to help connect you to resources on campus. certainly to help if you are not feeling, if you're homesick, or maybe you're not feeling like you connect with a roommate, they are a great resource to be able to help you and to hopefully get you to feel a little bit better, or to talk with your roommate. And so I would strongly encourage you to start there, as they are a really good resource that's a peer. We also have residence hall directors that are in each building or cluster of buildings. They're another really great resource for students to be able to talk to about things that may be going on. Since you'll be signing up for housing for the entire academic year, it's not an easy process to break that contract, and generally that only happens in very specific situations where there isn't any other option. And so again, all of that information is located in our housing contract, but I would highly recommend, again, if you're feeling like you're struggling or need someone to talk to, reach out to your RA. They're a really great resource to start those conversations.
Okay, next question. What if you sign up for a room and do not have a roommate? Are you stuck with whoever wants to room with you?
Well, I wouldn't say that you're stuck with them. I would look at that as an opportunity to potentially have a really great new friend. So what happens is, again, during the room selection process, you're going to be able to select in. So if you haven't selected a specific roommate and you select into a space where someone has already selected, then obviously they're going to be able to see who you are and be able to connect with you. If you're selecting into a completely open room, then obviously someone else could select into that space. Now, they're going to have the same access to your profile questions as you have to theirs. So I would definitely suggest looking at that. But even more than that, I would suggest connecting with them. A lot of students are really nervous about coming onto campus and about having a roommate, because a lot of folks don't have a roommate before this. It's a really important part of your college experience to have that roommate relationship. And so it's okay if you're a little bit nervous about it. But I would highly recommend just sitting down, over Zoom or FaceTime or on the phone, and just talking with each other, getting to know one another, figuring out what's important for you, what's important for them, and kind of starting off that relationship. Don't just rely on what you might be seeing in social media or what you might be seeing on the profile questions. There's a lot more to folks, and I think it's really important that you connect with them personally. Again, if you have any questions once you're in that process and feel like you need extra support, please don't hesitate to reach out to our office.
Thank you. Next question. How do you choose a hall such as Berry, etc.?
Sure. So we'll be sending out more information about the actual room selection process, but you may have noticed that in the housing application, there wasn't a place for you to preference your hall. We've been getting a lot of questions about that. If you've talked to people that may have been a student here in the past, you may have heard that you would be able to do that during the housing application process. This year, we actually changed the housing application process so that you're not selecting a specific building when you go through the application, because you'll be going in, again, selecting it during room selection. So it's a really nice opportunity, because before you would be able to give us 3 options. And if we didn't have spaces in any of those options, after that, we would kind of have to guess what you were looking for. And so now we won't have that issue. You'll be able to go in, you'll be able to see what spaces are available, and you'll be able to select them. We'll send out some more information again, and it will even have screenshots that are going to show you directly what room selection is going to look like. So once you get in there, you won't be surprised. We tell people, if you've ever shopped on someplace like Amazon, you are fully prepared to go through room selection. It looks a lot like that, where you'll put your room into a cart, and then you can check out at the end once you've selected the perfect building and room for you.
All right, next question. Do the suite living spaces require you to clean your own bathroom?
Oh, a really good question. Yes, they do. Actually, in fact, all areas on campus for next year would require you to clean your own bathroom. So what I remind students, and this is another really important part of getting to know your roommate, is this is where you want to talk to your roommate, right? If you've never cleaned a bathroom before, that's okay. For one, ask somebody maybe in your family or your friends about, tips on how to do that. But then have those conversations early with your roommates. Talk to people and say, talk to each other. Figure out who is going to be the one to take out the trash. Who is going to be the one, this week to make sure that they're cleaning the bathroom, things like that. It doesn't have to just fall on one student, and it shouldn't. Everyone's sharing that space. So having those conversations early I know that sometimes for students, it might feel a little awkward bringing up things like that. The good part is that about a week or so into your time on campus, your RA will actually contact you about filling out a roommate agreement or dossier. And what that allows you to do is have those conversations with your roommates. You have to have them because the RA goes through and does them with everyone, but it allows you to have those conversations in an open way and be able to talk specifically about things like who's going to clean things, what's important, you know, if we're going to be able to have guests in the room, who would be able to do that, things like that.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Can a non-honor student live in Berry?
Yes, great question. So definitely non-honor students can live in Berry, and we have several floors of non-honor students. Generally, depending on the number of honor students that might choose to live in Berry, they may fill up the entire second and third floor. Sometimes not. Sometimes they just fill up the entire second floor and parts of the third floor. And so the third floor may be kind of a mix of that. But if you're not an honor student, you can certainly live in Berry. Berry is a really great building. If you haven't already, I would definitely recommend going on our webpage and checking out our residence halls page. That page has links to each specific building. It tells you a little bit about the building at the top. Then a little bit further down, it goes through and it goes through the amenities that are there. Some of it, like if there's an eatery, let's say in the base of the building, then it would have that information there. It's going to have pictures of what is available in that building. So it'll have a picture of the desk, of the wardrobe, of the bed. So you can see all the things that would be available. There's also a link to each one of a 360 video tour. So you can really get a sense of what the building feels like, what that room feels like through that, since I know it's been hard to come to campus due to COVID.
Thank you. Next question. Can you get a room by yourself, and if so, is it more expensive?
Sure, that's a really great question. So for incoming first year students, for freshmen, we traditionally do not have any private rooms available. I know that some of the folks that may be on here may be incoming transfer students, and so it does look a little bit different for those folks. And again, we'll send out some more specific information, but private rooms, unfortunately, are very popular. Well, I guess it's fortunate that they're popular. And so a lot of our returning students do select those spaces. So the buildings that we have available for first year students are mainly doubles. If for any reason that would change, we would certainly let folks know, and that would be a part of the room selection process that we would highlight when we send out information. Again, back to that roommates or that residence hall page that I talked about, it also lists the price for each one. So that's also a good starting place. If you're going in and you know that you or your family has a specific budget by which you really don't want to spend more than that for the semester, definitely take a look at that so you can have those conversations with your potential roommates, because I think it's really important that that be something that everybody is on board with before you're selecting a space. As you can see on that page, our private rooms are more expensive, but that's again because it's an amenity to have your own space. But generally, first year students aren't able to have their own room, and some transfer students will be able to, and we'll send out more information when we get a little bit closer to room selection.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Can the college do a random selection based off of roommate questions instead of roommate choice?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I'll say that's what we used to do. So we used to go through and allocate specific roommates based on a lot of variances, right? So based on the answers that people had, based on what buildings they were interested in. What we found is that this past year, you know, as we were going through it, obviously there was a lot happening on the campus with COVID. We anticipated that we would be going ahead and allocating students as we had every year in the past. Because of everything that happened with COVID and us needing to de-densify and put fewer students in our halls, we actually had to go through and have first year students participate in room selection because we needed to kind of undo what we had done and redo it in a really quick manner. And so doing it through the room selection process was how we had to do it. We thought that that would just be a one-year thing, but what we found from students is that they loved it. We got a lot of really positive feedback from students that really enjoyed the opportunity to select their own space, to select their own building. And so that's what we're doing. We've always had the roommate matching option for students, but with our new portal, it's just a much stronger product. and students are able to see things in a much easier way and find those roommate match easier. So we're not able to specifically match students, but that page that we went over specifically about recommending a roommate is a really good place to start, because that's basically what we were doing. It was just the computer was doing it all on its own, and it wasn't taking any feedback specifically from the student. So it's really nice to be able to look at that and say, oh, look, this person is recommended to me. Yeah, we certainly do have a lot in common. Get in touch with them, and that might be the start to a really great roommate relationship.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Is there a form to fill out to find a roommate?
So there's not a form to fill out specifically to find a roommate. What you would do is when you go through the housing application process, one of the pages is called profile questions. So that's where you're going to answer all those profile questions. If for any reason anyone besides you may have filled out your application already, I would definitely recommend going back in there and checking to make sure all of the questions that you answered are how you would want to answer them. And I always encourage people to, as you're thinking about answering those questions, who are you today? Not who do you want to be, right? We all want to keep our rooms cleaner, right? Or I hope that you all want to keep your rooms cleaner. But if you're not a person that keeps your room clean, that's okay. You can put that on there. Don't put what you're trying to be. Go ahead and put what you are right now. That way you're going to get matched together again, and people will be able to see who you currently are. I certainly hope that you get to there and that you're able to have a more clean room if that's something that you're going for. So once you fill out those profile questions and you're able to put into the bottom of that page kind of that piece we talked about, where you can put in maybe what you're majoring in, what your hometown is, what your interests are, that's the kind of first part in that roommate piece. So everybody goes through and does that. Then you'll see the next part of the application is that roommate, the group formation page. And so you'll be able to specifically from there, that's how you'll get to each of those pages that we talked about earlier. There's not a separate form, it's just part of the housing application.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What are the names of the freshman residence halls? And I have the list up, so I'm happy to answer that. So you don't
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tim.
So the halls available for incoming freshmen are Berry Hall, College Lodge, Craig Hall, which is not available for next school year, Liberty Street Apartments, McAllister Hall, McConnell Hall, and 10 Warren Place. Okay, next question for you, Megan. It says what time slots. I'm assuming this person is asking what specifically the time slots are and how they'll work for June.
That is a really great question. So we're going to send out a little bit more information later in April. Again, a lot of it is dependent on how many students are applying and when they're doing that application process. So we will go through once we have a little bit more information, and we'll start setting those room selection times. Again, as a reminder, if you joined us late, for folks that are applying and for folks that are going through the application process, it's important for you to complete your application as soon as possible, because that again puts you in line. You can always go back through and add a roommate later, but the earlier you complete your application, the better. What we then do, once we have all of the roommate information or all the applications in, we will go through, you'll again have that chance to continue to add roommates to your group until May 15th. Then we close that, and that's how we will then go through and run who is selecting at what time. All of those is based on the date that you completed your housing application. And so if you're in a roommate group and there's, let's say that there's 4 people in your roommate group, whoever is the one that completed their housing application first is going to be basically the one that sets the time for the rest of the group. So again, we'll send out a little bit more information. All of the room selection times are going to happen in early June. Our goal is that everyone will be able to select their spaces before we get in too much into the orientation season. There might be a little bit of overlap for the first orientation session or 2, but our goal is to be able to get everybody to be able to select their housing before that starts.
Thank you. So someone did ask a question regarding the price of Butte Rivers, but as our moderator Meredith did answer, just in case everyone did not see that, Butte itself is not going to be available for the upcoming school year. That's why there is no rate, and that also applies to Craig Hall. So the next question for you, Megan, is, are we able to hang items on the walls?
Ooh, good question. So certainly we want your room to feel like you're home away from home, right? We want it to be that. I say that as long as your home away from home does not include you putting a whole bunch of holes in the walls. So I would definitely encourage you, if you're thinking about hanging stuff, to use the very widely available products that are out there to be able to hang things on walls. I do encourage you, if you're using something like a command strip, I know it seems silly, but there are directions on how to remove a command strip. I know that Kim can attest certainly to the fact that at the end of the year, we see a whole lot of stuff that people where they were using the command strip, but instead of doing what you're supposed to do, you know, the pull down and let it release, they just rip it straight off the wall, and that's what ends up damaging the wall. So ideally, we would love it if no one would put anything on their walls. Yet at the same time, I want people to be happy, and I want people to have this feel like this is their home. So use those products that that should get everything off the wall. Follow those steps to make sure that you're taking it off properly. Some certainly important things to keep in mind. Things like mounting a television are not a good idea and would not be something that's okay, because those do a lot of damage to the walls.
Thank you. Next question. How do you know which building to choose? There are so many options.
Whew, I know. There are so many options. What I would suggest doing first is I would say start kind of and say, okay, I think going from a budget perspective first is often helpful. Because if there's a building that you really want to live in, but it falls outside of your price range, then that's okay. But that can kind of cross that off your list. After that, then I would consider, the next thing that I would consider is kind of what the amenities are of that building, right? So do you have a building that is, you know, really close to, let's say, King Street, right? Where it's a really awesome place to be able to explore the city. Or do you want a building that might be closer to an eatery, right? Like a Berry, where you have an eatery at the base. Maybe you really want to be close to our kosher, vegetarian, and vegan dining option, Marty's Place, and you want to then select McConnell. So check out that residence hall page, as it gives a lot of information. There's also a Google map at the bottom of each of them, so you can see exactly kind of where on campus it is. There's also a newly formed, thank you to Meredith, map that shows all of the first year residence halls as well as all of the eateries on campus. And so you can really get a sense of how far things are away from each other. I will say this, oftentimes students think that buildings are so far away from other buildings. And that might be true depending on where you grew up. I will say that generally though, we do not have a huge campus. And so it is pretty easy to get from one area of campus to the other. Some students do decide to bring bikes to campus, which is a great way to get around. But often students don't do that. They just walk around and are able to get to places. So the campus is not so huge that you're not able to do that. So I would definitely start with price, then look at amenities. And then from there, you can kind of choose. I would have multiple options available for you. Again, we're going to send out some general information about room selection, but we're also going to continue to send out updated information as we go through room selection, so that as we get to your time in room selection, you will be as prepared as possible, and you'll know what buildings we have spaces left in, and we'll give reminders and stuff like that. So at this point, I would just look and see, make that list of all of your top places and maybe why those are your top places, because then you can always go back later and say, okay, maybe this is something that, you know, my roommate is something that's important to my roommate that I didn't have on my list. I want to go ahead and add that. Again, really great conversation starters to be able to figure out what's important to you. If you ever have a question about any of our residence halls, or you're seeing something on there that you're not sure about, again, please reach out to us. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Megan. So the next question is asking, where are the costs for each specific dorm? I don't see it under residence halls. So I did attach the link to that page on our website, but just a general summary for you all. Prices range from $3,000 a semester to $4,500 a semester for our residence halls that are available to incoming freshmen. If you look at that specific link, you'll see the breakdown for each specific building, but keep in mind that this is the cost per semester. So next question for you, Megan. Can you change roommates if you just don't hit it off? And if so, how difficult is this to do?
Good question. Historically, we have allowed people to change roommates. What I always remind people is that the ability to change roommates always has to do with if we have space for them to do that, right? So if we are 100% full on campus, then it's going to be hard for us to have somebody switch roommates because there wouldn't be another space for them to move to. So generally, and I keep saying generally because obviously this semester and this year was so very different because of COVID. So we had some different policies and procedures in place this year, but we hope that in the fall, we're kind of going back to our normal process. And that is that generally we kind of freeze any removes that might be happening for the first 2 to 3 weeks of the semester. And that really is on purpose. We want students to be able to not just have a one, you kind of come in, maybe you don't hit it off with your roommate immediately. We want to give it that time, right? Just like I'm sure you think back to some of your closest friends, when you first met them, maybe they were your best friend to start off with. That's great. But they may have also been like, this isn't my favorite person. But then over time, you got to know them a little better and that relationship changed. So we do the same thing with roommates. So we kind of freeze that. And then what we would do is we would open up a process by which you can request a room move. And so we'll send more information about that, but any kind of form or anything like that you'll ever need to fill out for housing, all of those will always be located right in the My Housing portal. And so if you ever see something that says, oh, now is the time that you could change, could decide to move to a different building, all of that's going to be in our My Housing and Dining portal.
Thank you. Next question. What if we want to select our room before confirming things with a potential roommate and end up put in a room with someone else?
Sure. So as a reminder, for to basically lock in who you're living with, make that roommate group, those all have to be made by May 15th, which would be before we started room selection. The reason that we need to close that before we actually start the room selection process is because we need to know the numbers of people that are selecting and the group formations behind it. There's a whole lot of, I'm sure, very boring occupancy management things that we do that you all don't generally see, but there's a lot of kind of back end stuff that we need to do to prepare everybody for room selection. And so you kind of have to, if you want to live with a specific person, you're going to need to go in and make that roommate group before May 15th. After that point, that's fine. You're still going to be able to go in and you're still going to be able to select a space, but you won't be able to necessarily be picking at the same time as someone else. So let's say that you ended up meeting someone, let's say on social media on May 20th, and you hadn't made a roommate group with them. That's okay. You're still going to be able to potentially live together. What that would mean, though, is that you are going to need to try to select around the same time. So if that person that you've met is selecting later than you, then you may want to then wait and select your room a little bit later. Again, we'll send out some more specific information about room selection and if you're in that scenario, what our best recommendations are, but it's still not impossible to live with that person. It's just a lot easier if you are able to connect with them and get into that roommate group by May 15th.
Thank you. Next question. What extent of interior modifications can a student make in the residence halls?
Sure. So in terms of interior modifications, certainly you can put items up, as we talked about before, trying not to do any kind of damage to our halls. Outside of that, you can certainly bring decorative items. That's certainly a nice way to make it feel like your own. You can't do things like, these should all seem like, no kidding. So you can't do things like build walls. You can't do anything like take down walls or take down doors. You can certainly, if let's say some students want to have some kind of window covering, right? You could put up a tension rod that you could have those like curtains or something like that up. But again, we encourage you not to put any kind of screws or anything into the walls that would do any kind of damage. Outside of that, if you have specific things, the only other thing I can think of would be furniture. Like, let's say that you really have a favorite desk chair and you want to be able to use that desk chair instead of the one that we provide. Unfortunately, the one that we provide is going to stay in your room because you can't remove any furniture from the space. But you could always say have that as an extra chair, you know, in the corner that you could use when a friend might come over. It just all has to stay in that space. Before you bring anything though, or before you decide to buy anything, I would definitely wait on all of those pieces and talk to your roommate. Just so that not both of you are buying everything. That's a really common thing that we oftentimes see with students, is that they get very excited about coming, and I get it. I was that same way when I came to college. But instead of waiting and saying, hey, what are you gonna bring? What am I gonna bring? Everybody brings everything, and you end up with a whole bunch of stuff that you probably don't need. You do not need 2 Swiffers for your room. You do not need, you know, a bunch of extra stuff. It's just going to end up feeling cramped in your room. So I would definitely suggest before you buy any of those things, talk to your roommate and figure out what's going to be best for both of you.
Thank you, Megan. I would also like to add, as the facilities liaison, please do not paint and please do not put up wallpaper.
Correct. Thank you, Kim.
Okay, it also looks like we are at our final question, which is, how do they assign room selection times, by application completion date or lottery?
Sure, great question. So we are going to assign room selection times based on the housing application completion date. That's an important piece to remember. It's not based on when you applied to the college. It's based on when you finished your housing application. So again, if you have not started your application, that's okay. Today would be a great day to do that. Once you've paid that $400 enrollment deposit, you'll be able to, it takes about a day for that to process. And then you'll be able to get your email and you'll be able to get into My Charleston. Once you're in My Charleston, you'll click on the My Housing and Dining portal in the corner. It's a picture of a house. When you click on that, then you'll be prompted to pay the $50 housing application fee, and then you'll be able to go through. If you've started your application and for any reason are waiting, I cannot think of one reason that I would wait at this point to do your application, because again, hitting that very last page and being able to finish your application, that's what kind of sets your space, your space in line for room selection. So go ahead and do that. That's really important. And if for any reason you started your application and maybe even you finished your application and now you're thinking, okay, I really want to go back in and find a roommate, that's okay. That all of those sections, you can make changes to any portion of your housing application at this point. But again, just make sure that you're making sure that it's definitely complete by May 1st at the latest, and that you then have the next 2 weeks to go ahead and find any other roommates and get those confirmed.
Thank you, Megan. That was our last question, but I do want to remind you all that if you did not ask a question or did not have do have a question that was not answered, you can always send us an email to housing.cofc.edu or give us a call at 843-953-2015. We are open Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. until 5:00 p.m. We did lose some questions due to technical difficulties, so please resend those questions and we'll have to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for helping, Kim, and thank you so much for the entire campus housing and campus services team. There's a lot of behind the scenes to make these things happen, and certainly we're so happy to have you coming onto campus today, or to coming on campus this fall. Thank you so much for joining us today, and please remember to review the campus housing website and keep an eye on your College of Charleston email account for important updates from us and other college offices. Thanks so much, y'all. Go Cougars.